We had one time we had a fight broke out, and these guys started punching each other, and Tom stopped it, said, no more fighting. And one of the players in the fight got in a scuffle the very next play. And he took the guy, offensive lineman's helmet off and threw it down the field. And Tom said, you go get that helmet now. And the guy said, no. And Tom screamed at him. The guy went and got the helmet, brought it back. And Tom turned to the scout and said, get that blanket guy off the field. Gone. Whew.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday, with the wisdom today coming from my guy, Mike Ryan, the sports medicine analyst for Sunday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, longtime head athletic trainer and physical therapist in the NFL. Got to ask him about some of these injuries, and I actually have some personal things I want to ask him about. I'm not going to lie. Very excited to talk about all those things with Mike, and we've got some information as it relates to Brandon Aiyuk. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Always love getting on guys that can make me smarter, as well as people that listen to the show and or watch the show, which is great. I'm talking about Mike Ryan, who I don't even know how many of you guys even know this. I know this. He's currently the sports medicine analyst, and he works the sidelines for Sunday Night Football on NBC Sports and Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime. So when I do a Thursday night game or Sunday night game, Mike, I always see you. I always say hi, but I'm not sure how many people really know about your role. I'll get to that in a second. 26 years he spent as an athletic trainer in the NFL and physical therapist, 20 with the Jags, 6 with the Giants. Mike, it's great to have you on the show again. And I guess let's just start with that. How many people do you think even know what it is that you do, or that you have this job? Or, I mean, obviously your friends and family do, but
Sure.
do you think that fans or people listening even know about your role?
Well, you know, Ross is playing 7 years in the NFL. You know, the athletic trainers, we kind of take a little bit of a back seat. We kind of work behind the scenes, so to speak, but it's a great role. I love it. I have great staffs to work with, the sideline with 2 great reporters, Melissa Stark with Sunday night and Kaylee Hartung for the Thursday night games. And it's a really kind of a fun niche role that really no one else is doing, but it allows me to kind of help the broadcast team in being accurate with the medical information and kind of deciphering all that confusing medical jargon and kind of making it simple for the viewers to understand football, injuries, rehab, and everything in between.
So let's talk about that, because you're not, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, you're never on camera, right?
No, but I'm always there if there's a big medical injury that needs a deeper dive, you know, a Damar Hamlin kind of thing, or something that we kind of, the viewers or the broadcast staff, the producers say, hey, we want to get more input that's a little bit deeper with more insight for those medical emergency kind of things. That's when I would jump on per se. But a majority of my role is to kind of keep the sideline reporters and the smart guys up in the booth updated with accurate medical information.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Like, I always see you and you're hustling on the sideline, but go through how it typically works. You see something and then you tell the producer and they relay. Go through what it's like.
Well, much like you guys as the players, there's a lot that goes on before you get on the field. So during the week, I'm putting together medical information and injury reports on both teams, updated injuries, past medical injuries. So we go into the game with a clear understanding of who's dealing with what. And as you see me in the pregame out there, kind of watching who's warming up, what injury, just so we have that information. So as the game plays out and there is a medical information needed, so to speak, I would talk to Melissa or Kaylee or the guys upstairs, our producers, and just kind of say, hey, look at that thing they're putting on the leg. That's a vacuum splint, or they're stabilizing his right knee. This guy's had an injury. That's the same knee he missed 3 games with last year because of an MCL sprain. So I kind of give the backstory on a lot of the injuries that are taking place and the medical procedures. What typically happens? What's a typical format? Because again, I did it for 26 years, and being the guy out in the field and evaluating the injuries, getting the sideline, assessing them. So I kind of give a little bit of the play-by-play, what the teams are doing, what the medical staff's there, what the players going through. But obviously the thing I really stay away from, which I think is really important, is I don't speculate. I'm not going to say, oh, I think that's an MCL sprain, or, you know, I think at that point you get into a little bit of that gray area that I think I don't want to play doctor on the air. We kind of focus on what we see, what we observe, what's going on, and the objective things that we know for sure. And obviously, we're getting information from the team itself as those injuries play out. That kind of helps us give an update of what they're thinking as well.
So, what is this time of year like for athletic trainers? Is this I mean, I know it's changed a lot, Mike, from when you and I were doing it.
Sure.
But gosh, back then, Mike, I'm just thinking about what our hours were like. And you guys are there before we are, and you guys are there after we are. So training camp, I don't know what it's like for the guys now, but back then, that used to be like 5 a.m. to 10
5
p.m.
a.m.
for you
to
guys?
midnight, because curfew was at 11. The guys would be running out the door after night treatments about 10:45 to get back to the dorm or the hotel. And that's the point you get caught up in your paperwork. So I would typically be there by 5:30 and leave around midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock. So it's a little different now. They spread it out. They're a lot safer because even in Jacksonville Heat, we would have practice with full pads with Coach Coughlin at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. 5 to 6 days a week. So that was a grind, a little different now. But to kind of answer your question is what's it like for the athletic trainers is this is a time you really get a great handle on the injuries because Ross, this is a time of year you really know who really wants to play. And in the off season, there's a lot of injuries. There's a lot of surgeries you have to rehab. There's a lot of junk and things that happened in the previous season. So you're using that off season to get guys ready to get them into training camp. But then you get a big decision about do you activate them for training camp? Because once you do, you're committed to the player being on the roster or at least having an opportunity to make the team. But if that player coming off, let's say, an ACL injury from the previous year, and you're rehabbing them the whole offseason, they're not quite ready, you have the opportunity to put them on PUP, physically unable to perform list. So they would be practicing off the site. They don't do a single team rep with the team. So it gives you more time to work with them in a more aggressive setting to get them ready for the regular season. So there's a lot of assessments, I think is a good way to say that, Ross, is you're assessing old injuries, you're assessing the new injuries that come up. Do you want to get this guy ready for some preseason games to see how he performs in a preseason game, or is he good enough to get him to the regular season and trust he'll make the team in the regular season? So there's a lot of crystal ball assessing, rehabbing, talking with coaches to determine, is this guy ready to play? Is he ready to practice? Is he ready for contact? There's a lot of questions that have to be answered, and training camp is a great time for the athletic trainers and the medical staffs to get those answers.
You mentioned the Coughlin. So, man, were you there right at the start of Coughlin, like 96?
Oh, yeah. I got there. I got here in 94. So I was with him even when we were building the stadium and building the team. And Tom was great. And I worked with Bill Parcells when I was with the New York Giants. So I was kind of used to that tough love and that, you're not going to get a lot of attaboys and pats in the back. Just get your damn job done and stay in your lane, so to speak.
I played in Washington with some guys that had been on that Jags team, or I've been around guys that were on the what's that?
You heard some stories?
They talk about it like it was Vietnam. It was unbelievable.
I'm not going to argue with you.
What was it like? Tell me.
It was tough and it was intense, but I love Tom because his rules on day one were the same rules at the end of the year. So whether you were the last guy on the roster or you were the starting quarterback, everybody followed the same rules. So it was much more consistent and it was tough. And what it did, Ross, is training camp's a great camaraderie time. And you get some of the best practical jokes and a lot of fun and a lot of things go on that. But it kind of became all the players kind of versus the coaches, so to speak. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it was kind of like us versus them kind of mentality. So it kind of created a lot of great bonding with the players because they know they weren't going to get a lot of love from the head coach because he was going to play hard, but you always knew Tom's focus is on winning. So you can never argue with it. He outworked everybody in there. He was usually the first one in the building. So it wasn't like he was, hey, do as I say, not as I do. Tom was putting in the effort and all the focus on winning every single game, preseason games included.
Wow. And it was full pads.
Oh yeah.
Two practices a day, 2.5, 3 hours.
Oh yeah. Yep. And it wasn't like nowadays there's a certain time frame. They time. If you go over that line in the off-season program or the workouts or the OTAs, and you go so much as a minute over that regulated Players Association time limit, the team is penalized for it. Back then, There was you get on that field early and you stay late. And if you need extra work afterwards, and you stay after and get it done. So there was no time limits for what you had to do. And it certainly made you tough. But what it did is, again, you found out who really wanted to play. And if guys were kind of going through the motions, they stood out in a hurry. And there was a lot of conversations I'd have with Tom where he'd say, get that guy off the field. And he would cut guys mid-practice, after practice. It didn't matter because he had a lot of guys on that list he was going to bring in. And the big thing, like I noticed with Tom, as with Bill Parcells, is, and Bill Belichick as well, I worked with him in New York, is they know the players they keep are the kind of guys that can play for guys like them. It's a different type of player and it's a different type of coach. And that chemistry is really important. And training camp was the time you found out who was all on board and who was kind of half in. Those half in guys were heading down the road in a hurry.
He cut guys mid-practice?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had one time we had a fight. A fight broke out and these guys started punching each other. And Tom stopped it, said, no more fighting. And one of the players in the fight got in a scuffle the very next play. And he took the guy, offensive lineman's helmet off and threw it down the field. And Tom said, you go get that helmet now. And the guy said, no. And Tom screamed at him. The guy went and got the helmet, brought it back. And Tom turned to the scout and said, get that blanket guy off the field. Gone. Whew. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So everybody walked around, and my whole thing was keep your feet moving because it didn't matter where you are. He was going to find you. Player, staff, athletic trainer, scout. If you weren't focusing on your job, he was going to see it.
Keep your feet moving.
Oh yeah.
It's funny. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about, Mike, in terms of like back then and now. I was reading an article that talked about how the latest science is that you're not supposed to ice injuries and that the swelling is part of the healing process. Is that true?
It's true in a sense at a cellular level, but it's so blown out of proportion, especially when it comes to football, that it's a little bit of a pet peeve for mine because I think it's one of those things that's if a little good, a lot's better kind of mindset. Where here's the reality is with an injury and you get inflammation, it triggers a lot of white blood cells. It's not like pulling a fire alarm. You realize that something has to do, there's some healing that has to take place. So with no inflammation, you don't get the signals of your bodies and your hormonal, let's heal things. But the reality is in football, when you're hitting as much as you are, the likelihood that you put an ice on a swollen ankle and there is zero inflammation is zero. So the reality is inflammation always going to be there. And inflammation is kind of our arch enemy, from trauma to cancer to arthritis. So the reality is with football and contact and the collision and the chronic injuries, you need ice. Like I always say, ice is your best friend. You need ice to control inflammation. It's a safer way to control pain. So icing is a really important part. Cold tubs. I have one on my back patio I use every day. The players live in the cold tubs. So you're controlling, you're always battling that inflammation. So to say that, yeah, you won't have any inflammation and it won't heal is a big exaggeration when it comes to contact sports like football.
Okay. So I have a question because I read the article and I went in the cold tub every day my entire career. Correct. And when I read the article, I was like, oh my gosh, did I just do the wrong thing every day for 7 years?
No.
Was it having the exact opposite effect of what I was trying to do, which was recover better for the next day? Please tell me, Mike, I did not waste. I did not sit in. What's the cold tub usually? Like 38 degrees? I don't know.
Usually it's about 48 to 52 degrees. That's on average what you have.
Okay, but please tell me, people don't realize how cold that is. That is
it's
cold.
Oh, it's colder than anything you would drink.
Nobody listening has ever been in a pool under 65 degrees. So tell me so I was not for 20 minutes every day up to my belly button or higher. Yeah. I was not doing the wrong thing.
You were not doing the wrong thing. I guarantee it. You were doing the right thing. You're controlling inflammation. It probably kept you from having to take in a lot of anti-inflammatories and pain medicine to control your pain. So it's a safer alternative. You did yourself a good job because, again, big guy pushing on other big guys for living on the fields on that remember the old AstroTurf, how bad that stuff was?
Oh yeah.
So no, you did yourself a positive thing by getting in that cold tank. It wasn't easy. It never is, but well done.
And you still do it now, Mike?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I get into it up my neck almost every single morning. Yeah.
For how long?
Usually 3 to 6 minutes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just
And
to
then
kind
I
of
may do
shock
some
your body?
contrast, like warm, cold, depending on, like I just had a big race 2 weeks ago. And after that, I came home and got straight cold. And then the next 2 days, I'd go warm, cold. I have a hot tub right next to it. And that contrast where you're controlling the blood vessels and then open them in the hot tub is a great way to get rid of, flush a lot of that crap out of the muscles and waste products and things that tend to make you sore 2 and 3 days later. The use of the ice and the contrast back and forth is a great way to get rid of that.
Okay, so then in the article I read, what were they talking about? When are you not supposed to ice? Like I have daughters now. Like I said to my wife, I'm like, I don't know if we're supposed to ice. Like,
Yeah.
when are you not supposed to ice? When are you supposed to ice?
I think a good way to look at it is if, like, let's say you have a fracture, and it's something really bad that you got to start that process. Because one thing, like another way of looking at that is a lot of times with early injuries, with a soft tissue injury, like you pull a hamstring, you wouldn't take Advil right after that because that is an anti-inflammatory. So you control the swelling and the bleeding with the ice. Because what's the ice going to do? It's going to make the blood vessels smaller, and it's going to slow the blood down, and it's going to allow that clotting, that bleeding to stop. Because if not, if you injure it and you break the blood vessels, you rip the muscles, you're bleeding into it. It's like a leaky faucet. What's the last thing you want to do with a leaky faucet? Turn it on, which is what you're doing when you're putting heat on it. You're opening up the blood vessels and the bleeding starts more aggressively. So icing it initially closes that, gets that down, but then the anti-inflammatories still help that bone to start to heal. So if it's long and if it's chronic kind of thing, that might be the thing you want to stay away from the ice. But if it's an acute, meaning it just happened, you got bleeding, you have trauma to the body, you took a big hit, that's the most important time to ice it, because that's when you want to stop the bleeding, stop the swelling, get that all under control, because all that blood that goes into a wound has to be pulled out as well. So the less in the wound, the bleeding process, the quicker that healing starts.
All right, so then I tore my right MCL twice, and my right knee bothers me sometimes, and I have
Okay.
like patella tendonitis. So if I do like an hour cardio, or like if I squat and lift legs a little bit, I typically after the workout ice my knee. Is that the wrong thing because it's chronic, or is it the right thing because it's acute after the activity?
A great rule I use is if the injury or the body part is swollen, red, or warm, that's a sign that you're getting extra inflammation in there and you're creating more trauma. If it's warm, red, or swollen or swelling up, that's when you want to put heat on it. And I would say probably when you get done with that, you're going to feel like either that MCL or around that kneecap, it's going to be one of those three. Am I starting to get a little puffy, things like that?
Yeah.
So that's when ice is going to be your friend. That's when you want
Okay.
to use it. And then a really important thing with that, Ross, is with that MCL, if you look at that leg, you've had 2 MCL sprains. If you stand in front of the mirror with your shorts on and you look at that leg, that right leg should have a bigger quad than the other side. If you look at it and that quad is smaller, especially at the lower inside part of the thigh, and that's kind of smaller compared to the other side, it says you've got to get that quad stronger. A strong quad with a chronic MCL is really, really important. So get on the leg extension, get the quad strong. That's really going to protect that old MCL.
Interesting. Okay. What I guess the one guy I wanted to ask you about, because it's such a unique situation. I mean, he's one of the Patriots' best players. Christian Barmore had a recent scare with the blood clots. What does that mean, Mike? I mean, is that something that the trainer or physical therapist handles? Is that at the doctor level? And is that something that he can come back from this year potentially?
There's a lot of question marks with this. So the blood clot is something you don't see with NFL players, but it's a medical problem. It's a medical emergency. And Nicole Lynn, Christian's agent, put out a good plug on X and referenced Jim Whalen, the head athletic trainer for the Patriots, did a great job of recognizing this, getting him to the right experts, and he was treated very quickly, which is really important because this is something that goes sideways very quickly. So he's getting his medical care, he's being treated. Blood clots, you typically tend to feel them hopefully in the calf. And if they travel to the lungs or the brain, it becomes a real problem. So finding them early is really important. The big question mark here is when will he be back? And really, they don't even know now at this point, because you get him on blood thinners, which really thin the blood out, and it's less likely for the blood to clot. And that's safe because now the blood can flow through your entire body, and there's less, not zero, but there's a lot less risk of a blood clot traveling to really important parts of your body. But with the blood thinners, you add a big trauma and a concern if you're having trauma and head injury. So playing on blood thinners for contact sports is not recommended. So they're going to be doing a lot of blood tests on him and looking at any kind of family history. There's some blood history things you can look at, markers, so to speak, that put you at a little bit of an extra risk. They'll be looking at things like that. So bottom line is, with Christian, there's a lot of question marks to be answered, a lot of questions to be asked and tests to be done before we know when we're going to see him back in the field. But first things first, the medical emergency was controlled early on, and that's a great thing, because that could be a real problem. Right now, it's get the test done and update down the road.
Love anytime I get a chance to talk with Mike Ryan. I could have done 2 interviews. I had a bunch more questions.
I always enjoy talking with you, Ross. Whether it's here or on the field, we always have fun.
I was too worried about myself with icing in the cold tub. I wanted to know. I just want to know I want to know what the deal is.
You're not alone if you're confused with that, because there's a lot of confusion on that topic. So it's a hot topic, and I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, sports medicine analyst, working sidelines, Sunday Night Football Thursday. If you're looking closely now, for those of you watching us on YouTube, you will see him on the sideline. If you look for him, Sunday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. Mike, thank you so much for the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Always enjoy it. Thanks, Ross.
Man, I love talking with guys like Mike Ryan. I'm telling you, those Coughlin stories are absolutely epic. Plus, I needed to know the deal with icing things. I read that article, like Men's Health or something. You know what they should say in Men's Health? That drinking Labatt Blue Light is delicious when you're doing it with your friends, living life to the power of we, always enjoying it responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. They should also say that Smirnoff is the perfect vodka for crafting delicious cocktails that are easy to make and versatile for any and all fans over 21. Listen, there's no I in football. Football is a we thing. Good drinks, good folks, home or away, Smirnoff. Long history, starting in 1864. So grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, the 49ers, they gave Brandon Aiyuk permission to negotiate a contract with other teams.
Right. There's been, in the last 48 hours, Jack, just since Monday's Ross Tucker Football Podcast, although I will say this, yesterday's Even Money was epic. Highly encourage people to check that out. That was an awesome, awesome show. A lot we got into, including betting on a lot of these preseason games. So certainly check that out. But there's been so much information and misinformation as it relates to Brandon Aiyuk. I want to make this my Labatt Take of the Week, Jack, which means it's presented by Labatt Blue Light, the pristine Canadian Pilsner. Enjoy your beers together so you can live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. 2 thoughts on the Brandon Aiyuk situation. Number 1, I don't think you can really have it both ways, Brandon. You want the money, you want the 30+ million a year, and I have no problem with that. But now you have a team that's willing to give it to you, but reportedly you're rejecting because you don't want to go there. Good luck getting the money you want and getting the exact location you want. That's going to be a tough double to pull off. And then the other thought is, I think the Patriots dodged a bullet. Reportedly, they pulled out of this thing. I don't know why these teams want to give up draft picks to pay Brandon Aiyuk $30+ million a year. There have been so many good receivers coming through the draft the last couple of years. You think about all the Packers guys and even Tank Dell last year, and obviously Garrett Wilson and Zay Flowers. Even this year, have you seen Malik Neighbors in training camp, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze? If I'm the Patriots, I just draft my receiver in the first round next year. I don't give up draft picks to pay Brandon Aiyuk a ton of money.
The Chiefs, they give Harrison Butker a contract extension, making him the highest paid kicker in the NFL.
Well, he's good. He's really good. He deserves it. And, my feelings on kickers, kicking, well documented. But my issue, Jack, is that they're too important. I don't diminish their importance at all. I think they're too important in the sport. You think about how valuable Justin Tucker's been for the Ravens, Jake Elliott for the Eagles, Butker obviously for the Chiefs. These guys are the difference between winning games or not. They deserve $6 million a year or whatever they're all getting now. Kudos to Butker. Greg Cosell tomorrow. Fantasy Feast, Tears of Dolan quarterbacks today. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Absolutely love it. How about backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, and Pizza Boy Brewing. There will be an appearance brewing at Pizza Boy in September. Speaking of that, I have an appearance Thursday night with Jack, Soul Joel's, Pottstown, PA. Hopefully some of you guys can make it there. It'd be great to see you guys in person. That'd be awesome. Now I think we're done here.